All right, good morning again. My name is Asma Afsaruddin. I'm chair of the board of directors of the Center for the Study of Islam and Democracy, or CSID for short. And it truly delights me to welcome you to the 21st annual conference of CSID in person after a 3-year hiatus. There's always great pleasure in being reunited with old friends, colleagues, and well-wishers. Although we maintained our presence online, I think we can all agree that conversations, discussions, and debates are always better in person, especially on a topic as enduring as democracy and good governance. The last time we met in person was back in 2019 at our 20th annual conference at Georgetown University. At that time, I had remarked that there was a certain poignancy and urgency attached to our concern for democracy and democratic values as the Trump administration limped to its last year in power. Many of us had remarked at that gathering that democracy was under siege in many parts of the globe, including rather remarkably right here in the United States. 3 years later, that sense of urgency is still there as we continue to inhabit a world in which well-entrenched democracies, fledgling democracies, and aspiring democracies continue to be assailed by the forces of authoritarianism, racism, ethno-nationalism, and anti-immigrant populism. There have been disheartening developments in recent times in the Muslim-majority world in particular, most recently and most notably in Tunisia, where Rashid Ghannouchi was recently arrested for his pro-democracy activism. For the longest time, we had observed that Tunisia was the one success story to have come out of the crucible of the Arab Spring. Recent setbacks there marked the end of what had appeared to be a hopeful march away from authoritarianism and toward the establishment of democratic procedures and institutions in the aftermath of what we must now reluctantly consider to be an aborted Arab Spring. In our 21 years of existence, the Center for the Study of Islam and Democracy has been laser focused on studying issues of democracy and good governance, promoting public and scholarly discussions on these topics, and probing effective ways of implementing the goals of democratic governance in the Muslim-majority world. We are a non-profit organization studying Islamic and democratic political thought and working toward merging them into a modern Islamic democratic discourse. The organization was founded in Washington, D.C. in March 1999 by a diverse group of academics, professionals, and activists, both Muslim and non-Muslim, from around the USA, who agreed on the need for the study and dissemination of reliable and nuanced information on this complex topic. In the last 21 years, our annual conference has dealt with a whole host of issues that reveal the complexities and challenges of nurturing democracy in the Muslim-majority world. This is not a part of the globe that is, however, hermetically sealed off from the rest of the world. As the lone superpower today, the United States exerts inordinate influence on the fate of the Muslim-majority world, especially in those swaths of the region that serve its strategic global interests. Our conference today, therefore, explores the question why the US should support democracy in the Muslim world and how. This is a timely topic, since good governance appears to be an elusive concept these days in the Arab and Muslim world. A global trend of political authoritarianism and extremism of all sorts threaten to undermine the very foundations of democratic civil societies, and the US has not consistently thrown its weight behind pro-democracy movements in the Muslim-majority world. Our first panel, titled "The Cost of Authoritarianism, Assessing US Mideast Policy Over the Long Term," will take on this thorny topic and set the stage for our continuing discussion throughout the day of the vulnerability of the democratic process in the Arab and Muslim world, and how US policies, particularly towards the Middle East, impact it. On the second panel, we will feature the journalist David Kirkpatrick from the New Yorker magazine, who will converse with us on the topic of Middle East authoritarianism and the subversion of Western democracy. This will be followed by 2 keynote luncheon addresses to be given by Dr. Amani Jaman, Dean of the Princeton School of Public and International Affairs, and Damon Wilson, President of the National Endowment for Democracy, on the topic of democratic backsliding and threats to democracy in the Arab world. This promises to be a riveting conversation and clearly one of the main highlights of our conference. Our third panel after lunch will take up the broad topic of political Islam and democracy and take a retrospective look at the last 45 years of the fraught relationship between political Islam and democracy. Later in the afternoon, our fourth panel will focus on the topic of the role of Islamic values in building a just society and political system. This speaks to one of the core objectives of the founding of CSID: how to draw from the rich resources of Islamic thought and tradition to support just and viable democratic political systems in the Muslim majority world and undermine authoritarianism there. Our final keynote speaker of the day will be Ahmed Galoul, member of the Executive Committee of An-Nahda, who will address the critical topic of the role of the international community in defending and supporting democracy in Tunisia. I would like to engage here the generous support of our co-sponsors, Engage, the Muslim Public Affairs Council, and the Al-Walid Center for Muslim Christian Understanding at Georgetown University. So as you can see, we have an exciting, timely, and thought-provoking program arranged for the day. I would now like to invite to the podium Dr. Dalia Fahmy, who I know is here somewhere, to step up and give her opening remarks. And I want to thank all of you for coming to join us here this morning.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, Dr. Asfaruddin, for those wonderful remarks. On behalf of myself, the board of CSID, and our president, Dr. Adwan Masmoudi, I'd like to thank you all for being here today. I want to put this conference in a kind of greater understanding of what's been happening. According to Freedom House's latest report, and according to the Arab Barometer Project, which I know Professor Jamal and Tesler will be talking about today, it looks like global freedom is declining for the 17th consecutive year. From wars of aggression to devastating human rights atrocities to coups, most notably recently in Tunisia, it would seem that the world is more in need of democratic support today more than ever. However, we're seeing a waning support for democracy. Not only have authoritarians further consolidated their rule, but even more critical attitudes towards democracy and political rights have declined in the Middle East. And a little over a decade after the Arab Spring, there's fewer hopes or grounds for optimism. 10 years ago, at CSID's 15th annual conference, discussions at that time centered around the hope and the dream for democracy that one day was going to take hold in the Middle East and North Africa. 15 years after President Obama delivered the Cairo speech declaring a new beginning in U.S. relations with the Arab and Muslim world, the Middle East and North Africa are far less democratic, and relations with the United States are based on stability at the expense of democracy. And we continue to look at stability and democracy as two sides of the same coin. Reflecting on this time period, MENA scholarship has posited certain questions. And this conference is going to attempt to really address these contemporary realities, looking at the challenges that citizens of the region are experiencing. Looking back at this moment, the cusp of the Arab Spring, we used to talk about things like getting to political pluralism. How can we get more parties registered in some of these countries? Where today we talk about simply stopping the killing, simply having an independent judiciary, simply having less political prisoners than there are in the history of some parts of the Middle East. The ongoing efforts to support the establishment of democracies in the Muslim world have been waning, and in this conference we hope to continue the tradition of CSID to bring together some of the brightest minds to discuss the challenges and posit a new set of questions that focus on U.S. foreign policy towards the MENA region and how we can address the political, economic, and social challenges. And possibly interject a question on where does the future of political Islam, what is the future of political Islam in all of this? So, without further ado, we will invite the first panel to join us on stage. Dr. Shadi Hamid, Dr. Wazayat, Sarah Levinson,